Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Solomon. I'm the manager of membership and education for the Palm Springs International Film Society. Thank you so much for signing up to see Collective and watching the film. We hope you enjoy this conversation. We're so grateful to have Scott Feinberg moderating the conversation from The Hollywood Reporter and the director of Collective, Alexander Nanau. We are so excited about all the films that we've been able to show to all of you, and it's been so amazing to have all these wonderful filmmakers here to talk to us as well. So anyway, thank you so much. And Scott, thank you again. I'm going to head out.
Thank you. And thank you, Alexander, for doing this. It's really very special to get to speak with you because I have to watch a lot of movies every year. I most of them feel like a bit of a chore. This one was such a revelation and really one of the best I've seen in a long time. And very curious to get to pick your brain. So I guess just to begin with, though, for people who, maybe don't know about your backstory or your other film work, can you just tell us a little bit about, yourself?
Yeah. So thanks a lot for having me. It's a great honor to talk to you. Basically, so I'm born in Romania. My background is a mix of different cultures, and we moved with the family to Germany when I was 10. So my upbringing was basically in Germany, where I did theater and went to film school, where I also did my first observational documentary about theater. When Romania joined the European Union, I became very curious because in 2007, because I had not visited the country for a long time. And so I started to do a project in Romania, which was the documentary The World According to IMB, about a collage artist that was basically a homeless man that did collages that were basically pop art he did in the 70s and 80s, but without having any context to pop art. So it was a parallel invention, let's say.
That's amazing, yeah.
A man that had no possibility to be a filmmaker, that's what he wanted to be, so he invented his own medium and told in collages basically his stories with the most famous actors, cutting them out.
Is there somewhere, is that available on a streaming service or DVD or anything right now?
No, I think it's just on DVD. It was in Romania and it's on HBO Europe.
Okay.
It's available, so on all HBO Europe territories.
Okay.
And in some other countries, television stations and so forth. And then I did, my next project was in Romania called Toto and His Sisters, which was also an observation documentary about three siblings waiting for a mother to come back from prison. But as her parole was not admitted, basically the story shows how all three of them start to become, in a way, independent. And yeah, after that I did Collective, which I guess we're going to talk about.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's just go backwards though for a second. The idea, you say you have this theater background. Did you, when you made those first steps into filmmaking, what even inspired you to do that? That's not something that everyone does when they have a interesting idea or they meet somebody interesting, like sounds like this subject was of that film, which I'm going to have to track down. I guess I'm just curious, what inspired you to pick up a camera?
Oh, I mean, the idea to become a filmmaker was basically the first idea to do films, which I think was when I was 14. I went to theater because I had the chance to meet a very famous director, Peter Zadek, who became my mentor, and I was able to do several plays with him as his first AD, and working with really big actors in Germany. So I think that theater, in a way, was my artistic upbringing, also in terms of authenticity, because the way Peter Zadek worked and his family, which we were moving around different theaters around Europe where we worked. And, we worked with Angela Winkler, Eva Mattes, all these wonderful actors. And one of the main things was that the theater we did there, it was always about authenticity and how does a director work with an actor to bring out the own personality of the actor on stage, not to just play a role. And I think it was there where I learned that the work of a director is basically nothing that you can learn. It's something that you learn how to build up a relationship to somebody and to communicate with somebody on a level that is not really in words, let's say, and give people basically a secure frame in which they are courageous enough to be themselves. And that's a theme that goes also through my work, and that I'm very interested in, like, what does it take to be yourself? And, how do you really touch this core inside yourself that means that's my truth, that's who I am, and I'm not pretending anything else.
I think you said that so beautifully. Absolutely. And you can tell that, for especially with Collective, where you're dealing with such sensitive stuff, for these people to be as open as they are in front of the camera, that would not happen with just anybody. And also, I'm sure it's also the way you work with, from what I understand, it's you generally operating the camera, and maybe a sound person. I just recently did one of these kinds of conversations with Frederick Wiseman, who, another great observational documentarian, and just even to communicate with your partner in a film like this without necessarily disrupting your subjects is its own skill set. But let's go back for a moment here to I guess it's November 2015, just weeks after the incident that inspired the Film Collective, that you took your first steps into deciding to chronicle it and dig into it. What obviously when you started this, you could not have known where it would all lead. So what was it that was interesting enough to you to even get started?
Yeah, exactly. So you never know in observational filmmaking where you're getting at. What I always know is that it will take time, and that I'm interested in the development of people and observing how people, react, what their life attitude is over a longer period of time. And in this case, it was for sure the fire that basically started a change in the Romanian society, because for the first time, so many young people took the streets instantly in one night. And for the first time, there was a generation claiming from a, let's say, corrupt old political class to step back, because everybody realized that the corruption that everybody accepted in Romania can really kill people, and it was not acceptable anymore. And coming with my German background and understanding what 68 meant in Germany, understanding that even in 68 Germany was a country that was deeply infiltrated still by Nazis, and they still had a former Nazi as a chancellor. I understood that maybe the time for 68 in Eastern Europe has come, because we just had before the demonstrations in Hungary because of the university they closed. And, there were things moving on in Poland and also in the Czech Republic. So in a way, we thought like something new is coming, something new is happening. And that was also the feeling. But what happened at the same time was basically that this populistic, corrupt political class started manipulating the whole society regarding the performance of the healthcare system. And they were really lying to a whole grieving nation that, that the Romanian health care system is on top of it, that they can treat this over 180 burn patients. And I knew how the hospitals were really, and we understood very fast. We are just assisting into the, widest manipulation that one could imagine, done by really the whole state through the media, and the press failed. So the press just propagated their lies when they were prohibiting parents to fly their kids out to burn units to other European countries, burn units that Romania didn't have. They were just lying that you don't need burn units, that there are no infections in the hospitals. And we got aware of the journalists in our film because they were the first one to really uncover the lies and uncover that, burn unit that they pretended is open and modern was actually closed. So we thought, so for an observational documentary where we need characters to which we want to observe these changes in society, this investigative journalist would be great. It would be the best thing. Only that, the head of our development team, which was also a team of journalists, basically said like, he is just, would be a perfect character. It's just too bad he will never let you film him.
Well, you anticipate exactly what I wanted to ask next, which is, these guys are, I hope, is it pronounced Catalan?
Yeah.
Catalan? Yeah. So Catalan's this obviously the principal investigative journalist who we're following in your film. And, I guess there are a lot of reasons why he wouldn't have talked to you. It's probably going to make it a little bit that much more daunting for a source to come forward to be honest with him. He might even think that you're covertly associated with the government, all of these different reasons. So how did you talk a guy who's obviously very savvy himself into letting you in?
Yeah, I mean, we had a first meet. I called him, and he accepted a first meeting where he was very, severe, and he was known as a very dodgy journalist. He was already the most feared journalist in Romania because basically he was an investigative journalist, but in the sports world, because he was a sports journalist. And he brought ministers down. He brought, his investigations brought the big football bosses into prison. And his and his teams, like Mirella and Razvan, first thought was, which they told me afterwards, was like, the Secret Service got really smart. Now they're sending a director in to try to shadow us. But I think that he saw that the work of our own development / investigative team was very thorough, and we had our own sources. And so I told him, listen, I do understand what you're saying, that the newsroom has to be protected and the whistleblowers and everything. But, give it a thought, please. If you have any investigation coming up, maybe there is a chance to shadow it. And he called me one day, not long after, basically, and said, listen, we are basically, things are happening. We are onto something. I can't tell you what it is, but, maybe we are even wrong, but let's try. And there were two things. First, they thought that I would come in with a big crew and multiple cameras, and they became more relaxed when they understood that it's basically me, but also the cinematographer, sometimes a sound man, and my assistant around, and another crew, wide away in a way. So yeah, once we started, basically everything took such a speed that we were just in it together.
Yeah.
It enabled me to do really observational, because they were under such pressure that I could do my work without them, thinking about it.
It's amazing. And I believe that was about 14 months you spent with them. Is that right? With that group of people?
Yeah, with big interruptions. I mean, in the first phase was really like 3 months and then a little pause. So, and then the next storyline came in with the minister, but over a period of 40 months is right. Yeah.
And then the other heroic figure, I would say, in the film, obviously, also is the young health minister, Vlad. And I guess that one was even more surprising to me, that you were able to kind of be embedded with him, because I guess first of all, the fact that they even ended up with a good guy in that position, knowing um, that they had a lot to that the government had a lot to hide, essentially, that he wound up there is amazing. But then that he was willing to invite you into the process. So again, I not to be repetitive, but how did you get this guy to trust you?
Yeah, it was. I think we benefited from several things. First of all, because there was this energy in society that everybody wanted something new, everybody wanted to open the windows, everybody felt like we have to change our society. And then the fact that he was not a politician, he was basically named from outside any political sphere. He was working in a bank basically in Vienna, but what he did also was he was a patients activist, which means he was, for example, organizing with friends a network, a bit like Dallas Buyers Club, bringing cancer medicine into Romania that was missing. And so he was a 33-year-old young guy, basically. And they named him, I guess, because they were expecting the anger in society to be absorbed by a really, let's say, unpolitical figure. And so I tried to get in contact with him, and so it was obvious. I thought, like, good, this story has to be written basically by life. And if that's happening now, the best thing that can happen is that we can tell the same story from inside the system, from the other side, basically. And when we met, I explained what I'm doing since when I'm following the thing. And he said, listen, me and my young team that I've brought here from different parts of the world, we believe strongly in transparency. And we believe that there's no reason that there should be secrets in the healthcare system. At the same time, I guess also because he knew what he was facing, maybe he thought it might not hurt to have a bit of evidence, let's say. But as with the journalists, the pressure suddenly, like right from the beginning, became so strong that I could do my work because they could not really take care of somebody who's trying to film us.
Was it also a concern on the part of either Catalin or Vlad that, they didn't really know you when you were at that time? Even if you weren't a government operative, there was a chance that you could even unintentionally share information of one with the other. That would be disconcerting as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that was for sure, basically, because I could have been a messenger going from one trench to the other. And that's something that I made very clear from the beginning with both of them. And I was lucky that they were so supportive and, that they trusted me. And there were moments, because basically I was filming in the newsroom while whistleblowers would blow the whistle. And I knew that an investigation would just, start a bomb in the ministry the next day. And then the next day I would be the first one in the ministry to wait for the thing to go off, not saying anything. And there were moments for sure where, journalists looked at me like, you know something, right? Like, yeah, I know something, but it will stay with me. It's
right.
The idea. And that they understood that and they respected that. And I think that gave them even more reason to trust me. And there was also a situation where I knew, I think weeks before they knew, one of the biggest things that, how the government tested and knew that the stuff is diluted in the end. And they realized at a certain point, like, wait a minute, you knew that. You knew since a month. We're working since a month in this, and you knew it. I said, yes, I knew. Mm-hmm. I filmed it even.
So that is the kind of, admirable journalism ethics of your own that I think we've seen dramatized in certain American films over time, and I believe that you were yourself. I don't know if it was during the making of the film or if it was post production or when, but I believe you really studied American films about journalism. Not the obvious ones only, like All the President's Men or whatever, but going back. And so I just wonder if you can talk about when that was, what the influence of them were. And also, this one's not about journalism, but I'm sure it's come up a lot. Were you familiar with The Third Man?
Oh, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
one of my favorite films
Yeah.
since my young years. I was familiar with that. The thing is, that's what I do every time when I start a project. After a short development phase, when I start to feel what the theme will be, what it will be about, I really start to rewatch everything that was done about, when I make a film about an artist, I really watch like hundreds of films about an artist and see what I like about them, what can be done better, what's the craft behind it. And I did the same here. And to my surprise, I could not find any European film on journalism. We don't have this culture in Europe to portray this pillar of society, journalism, as such an important pillar of democracy. And so for sure, I had to turn to American films and understand basic things like how do you dramaturgically talk about such boring things as informations talked about around tables, and how do you build dramaturgy. But I think, like all films, there's the outer shell of the theme, like journalism, politics, corruption. But for me, the core is always the question of individual identity. So that's what I look. That's also how I look for my characters. Like, who are they? What do they think they are? How do they act? What's their very own identity? And that you can see then portrayed basically, or shaped out in, be it the journalist, the way he is behaving towards his mission or his job, be it the whistleblower that has an identity crisis, like, should I confront it? Should I have the courage to become a loner from now on because I confronted the system? And down to the victims in the film, which basically is about identity. If you see Teddy, the burned girl, it is about her realizing she is herself, even though she looks different. She will not let herself poison by what others have done to her, and she knows who she is. So it's also a search for identity, but the outer shell is the story in a way. And with the parents of the victims, the same. The fact that suddenly, while we were filming, they put on this song, which was the favorite song by their son. It was basically the stick and the playlist of their son. Was for me revelatory, because it was what defined their identity. Although all these things have been done to them, they knew who they are, and that the most important thing is, how we treat each other.
So was it ever a debate in your own mind whether or not to show the footage of the fire, which obviously is disturbing and probably traumatic for some of the people that survived it, but also how do you talk about this fire and the gravity of the corruption that followed without having a visual of what I mean, I could see both I could see both sides of the argument, so I just wonder what your thought process was.
Yeah, it was for sure an issue. It must be said that this footage is from somebody I knew that was in the club, that filmed the concert. He was friends with the band. They shared a studio. There were several cameramen. Not all of them survived. And also this friend barely survived. And I met him by accident when he was out of coma, sitting in the office of a friend and telling his story. And I said, like, Mihai, listen, I started to make a film about this, about your story. Would you like to join the band? And he was a documentary filmmaker himself. So he learned to do sound and became basically also the soundman, but a very close collaborator for me because he was so much part of it. And we debated very long around it, and I had, first my doubts, and for sure my head was full of, okay, what would I do if, I would have images from inside a lager, a concentration camp? Would I show it? Would I not show it? But then I understood that it is important for a viewer to see how fast your life can change, that it takes seconds from a normal life to a life where your life depends on the functioning of the society around you, which is in a way the core theme, like, how much are we dependent on the society around us to function, and how much do we contribute to that. And that's why I decided to show it the way we show it, just to understand that a tsunami can come anytime. And in a way, it's strange because then the pandemic came and we all became dependent on the healthcare systems and on the lies or manipulation of our politicians. And the fire basically became, in a way, a symbol for, okay, it can also be a pandemic, it doesn't have to be a fire.
I was going to say, I mean, if people who can't find Romania on a map can relate to this, particularly since March, when we've all been lied to, we've all, and then also seeing what you're talking about, as when I say we've all been lied to, I mean in terms of it's gonna magically disappear, it's gonna testing, everyone will be able to take a test next week, anyway, so you're obviously in this project, you were dealing with very sensitive stuff that would be embarrassing to the government if and when it came out. In the course of making the film, the guy who ran the pharma company turns up dead, and as your film shows, it may or may not have involved foul play. There were a lot of people who had a reason for him to disappear. That would have scared me. Did it scare you that people are dropping dead around you?
Let's say in this case, I was prepared by the third man.
Yeah.
Because it's basically the same story, right? It's Harry Lime is in the third man selling diluted penicillin in post-war Vienna, and once he gets encircled, he shoots himself. The strange thing is that a German, very known newspaper, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, wrote about this parallel between Harry Lime and this CEO of Hexipharma before he took his life, like 10 days before.
Wow, that's
and
crazy.
He said something like Harry Lime is basically a petty criminal in comparison to this Romanian CEO that diluted the disinfectants, and Harry Lime took his life. Like he left it in a way open, what will happen to this guy? And then 10 days later, he kills himself. So that was a strange thing where, films and movies and life are very equal. I'm not sure that I was afraid. I was very concerned. I knew that we were surveilled. I knew that my phone was listened to. But at the same time, that basically what we made were, our production was very well organized in securing the footage every day on multiple sources, hiding them really every night in multiple sources. So it was a whole, a whole organization around how do we protect our footage. What I didn't realize was another thing, that we were basically filming things that were happening and that were maybe hot right during that time. And I don't think that I was surveilled in the end, to be threatened, but only to see if I have more information than the services. And I think that nobody took it seriously because everybody thought like, okay, good, so he's filming this stuff, he's hiding it somewhere, but he's not coming out with it. So where's the threat? And I don't think that they have, a documentary filmmaker that is doing that filming for over a year. That was not really, it doesn't seem like a threat for information that is anyway out there through the media. So yeah, I think maybe the journalists could have been more endangered than me.
Yeah. So how did you know when it was time to stop filming? Because this could have gone on. It could still be going on.
Yeah, it could be a series, a lifetime series in Romania, yeah. Like now in America for the next 100 years, you can make a series. So I didn't know. So we kept filming after the point where the film stops in the narrative stops in the film. And at a certain point, the society got where they get big demonstrations because the social democrat, corrupt, populistic administration that came in, like trying to dismantle the judicial system, replace key people in institutions, and basically destroy democracy and destroy the institutions from within, which you are now very acquainted with, let's say. And at a certain point, I realized, no, in a way, it's not anymore about our character. It's not anymore the core theme that I'm looking for. And so we stopped maybe 6 months after what we see in the film and went to the editing room and started to watch footage.
With, if I've read correctly, 400 hours of footage. Is that right? That's is that overwhelming? Like I would probably break down just from looking at that.
Not really. I think it's let's say a medium amount of footage you have when you shoot for a year or a bit over a year an observation documentary. But in a way, you know what are the good parts you have shot, and that are the things you start working at. And for sure, you have selects and things that you think you will never need. And at a certain point, when you're desperate and nothing works, for sure, then you go there and look for, for the rescue. But
okay, so just winding down, just final 3 things I wanted to ask you briefly, if I can. What has the response to the film and to the heroes of the film been in Romania? Let's start there.
The response was, we intentionally waited a bit before we launched it. And we launched it, I think, in cinemas by end of the second half of February, and we only had 2 weeks before the cinemas closed down that we couldn't foresee. But only during that time, a documentary, because we don't really have a documentary culture in Romania. People don't go to cinemas; they watch it on Netflix or other platforms. But if let's say a good number until then was 3,000 to 5,000 viewers for a film during several weeks, in 2 weeks we had 25,000.
Wow!
So people really came to see it, and we were so surprised because we had a week of traveling around the country with the protagonists, and the average age of the viewers was really young, like between 16 and 30, most of them. And that was very encouraging. And we had wonderful Q&As, sometimes in the city we would fill 2 times during an evening a room of 800 people.
Wow.
So it was a great experience. And then it won, because the pandemic hit, it went, I think, 3 weeks later on to HBO, and it really became the most watched film on the HBO platforms, and for the whole year then, more than all the Avenger films and so forth. And I think it's also the most watched documentary on HBO Europe, in all European countries where it is. But the more, let's say, really encouraging thing was that once the film was out, encouraging for us, but tiring for the journalists, the number of journalists, like before that they had, let's say, 10 leads from whistleblowers, 10 valid leads towards injustice, corruption, and so on, in their mailboxes, on the different inboxes. And once the film was out, it jumped to 120 per day. So it was hard for them to go. So it felt like, okay, people are really encouraged to to come out and to decide in a way which side they're on, and if they really want to keep on, standing on the side and watch these things going, the corruption going on.
That's amazing. And I guess the next obvious question is just, there's a aspect of this which is both very realistic and demoralizing, where we see how the system can beat down good guys like Vlad. In the years since the footage ended, the production ended, has the system itself, I don't know has the healthcare system cleaned up at all?
No, that's hard to say that it cleaned up, because what happened after the fire, really, the Romanian society started to change a lot, and we have a very strong civil society that we didn't have before. That even, the civil society, but in order to prove to politicians and the healthcare system, you can build new hospitals, you can reform things, started to build a hospital from scratch, which is now ready, and it's a fully modernized, great hospital, which was funded basically by citizens through donations. And for example, even the band Metallica donated €250,000 to it.
Wow.
But the state didn't build any new hospital. But things changed nevertheless. So people started to vote, and to vote differently. And they started to vote for new parties, reformatory parties, and also Vlad Voiculescu, the young health minister that we see in the film, joined one of these parties 2 years ago. And they managed to get enough votes so that, let's say, a bigger party was forced to make a coalition with them and give them also some ministries. And so since Christmas time, Vlad is back in the ministry as Minister of Health.
That's great. That's great. All right. So last question is just, let's just set this up by noting no Romanian film has ever been nominated yet for the Best International Feature Oscar. Only one has ever been shortlisted. Were you surprised that Romania submitted this film, knowing that it doesn't necessarily make them look wonderful to the world, but I guess the fact that they've submitted it is a sign of progress. But anyway, what does this mean? The fact that you have now been, you and your film have been chosen to represent your country to the whole world, and have been so embraced by the entire world, really. I mean, this is a movie that is on top 10 lists by critics all around the world. It's been recognized by organizations that have, American and all others, many others. But particularly, I mean, there's something about the Oscar that being the representative of your country. I'm just curious if it surprised you and what it means to you.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would like to say is that the first politician recognizing this film about state corruption and the state that crushes people is Barack Obama, who put it on his 10 best list of 2020. The other thing that Romania chose it sounds like, the political class suddenly realized something. No, here I think I really have to thank AMPAS, and to thank AMPAS for their rules, because their rules say that it has to be an independent commission who is selecting these films. So it was an independent commission, for sure, named by the Romanian Film Center, but they're independent. So it was a group of young, courageous film critics that by a secret vote voted for this film to represent the country. And that's all I want to say regarding the pressure that was made to reverse this decision. And there was, I have no proof, but the discussions around it were pretty existent. I don't know if you read it, I allowed myself to turn down on a Medal of Honor for Culture from the Romanian president several days ago, because of the politics, the cultural politics of the country during the pandemic that didn't support cinema, and they even basically did not organize any financing rounds that they have to have 2 times a year. And the response to that by the state was that they started to attack me harshly and to try to, let's say, drag my name a bit through mud. And so I think that the political class is still there. And I know that it is the right film to represent the country because I know how many people have seen it. I know how many whistleblowers have come forward for it. And I know what it means for many people that write to us to tell us that, it makes them go on. It lets them, it gives them hope, and also it gives them a deeper and new understanding about the role of the press. And they realize that without, first of all, the courage of individuals like the whistleblowers and the doggedness and courage of the press, so many more people would have died in Romania. So I have no doubt that it's the right decision, but I think AMPAS has really to stick to their rules and really be careful that countries that countries follow them. It has to be an independent commission.
Well, thank you for your courage in telling this story. It's really something that all of our country could learn a lot from, as well as has been clear over the last 4 years. But and thank you for doing this, and best of luck the rest of the way. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.